Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of Into the Rift. I'm your host tonight, Daniel Dracos, joined by two classic members of this show, Dave Thropp, I said that wrong again, probably, and of course, Chase Wasner. And then our special guests for the night, we have two. First off, Reasony from Machi Esports from Southeast Asia, and of course, Frost Curran, Chinese expert and host of China Talk. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about tonight is Riot's new coaching rule. Coaches are now officially recognized as parts of teams. They're paid and they're held to the same standards publicly as players. Additionally, they're allowed to participate in the pick ban phase. How does this change things? What are we looking forward to with this?
Well, hopefully it'll cut out the amount of times that you hear we completely messed up pick and ban as like an excuse, right? Because you hear that all the time, like, oh, if we just pick this, or if we just ban this, or if we had just stuck with our strategy. Like, how many times you hear that, like, a coach will say, oh, we played this strategy all week, and then we completely threw it out the window as soon as we went in. You can't really say that anymore. So that'll be nice. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more thoughtful pick and ban phases, I guess.
It's like that moment when the Samsung White coach is being interviewed and he says, our teams, we're never going to be egotistical. We're not going to overlook our opponents. We're going to take every game seriously. In the very next game, they have an awful draft phase and they throw to CSM. No, but before we kind of go into this conversation, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier before the show, like kicking the shit around, I guess. But I think it's important not to just think about like the theory of like having a coach on pick and ban, but also recognizing that Riot is recognizing coaches and other people in the industry as kind of like important and paragons and platforms of information and being experts at League of Legends. Because traditionally, only the professional player is recognized as an expert in League of Legends. I don't think Riot puts that out consciously and says, like, you can't be an expert unless you're a professional player. I think it's much more subconscious. Like, if you think about their analyst desk, like with Dash and Zyrene, there would be some level of analysis, but only until recently when they brought on Prawley during the playoffs did it truly become an analyst desk as far as like looking at the plays and what happened. Before, it was traditionally like an interview desk, and even in EULCS, it's mostly just shocks. Like, she kicks it back to a player and she asks them some questions, but there's no like, what could have been done here or anything like that. And so it's constantly putting, the professional player knows he's the person who gets to talk about it. If you look at the color casters that Riot has hired, most of them were professional players. Zyrene is the only one who wasn't. Kobe, Jat, Deficio, all have like, they were all professional players at some point during the league. Monte Cristo doesn't work for Riot. He's OGN, so he would be the other go-to. So the fact that Riot is now putting monetary gain on someone who feasibly won't be a professional player definitely could be. We've seen that transition made very successfully by a number of coaches, Scara, Incarnation, things like that. But that's kind of exciting just from that standpoint alone.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm excited about mostly is that now I feel like the level of analysis we will get post-game is just going to be that much deeper, because I feel like despite the fact that Riot has said that these professional players are credible, oftentimes their arguments aren't quite sound, or they don't really give enough evidence. Whereas I feel like coaches, they have to think these things out. This is what they do. And I'm really looking forward to like the post-game being much, much deeper level of analysis, as opposed to players coming on and being like, well, we saw this guy blew his cooldown, so we went in for this team fight kind of thing,
I'd say rather than deeper analysis, we're going to start seeing some different analysis, and that alone might be worth this for me. We've heard, players approach the game in a very specific way because they have to play their position. They have matchups to keep in mind. They have team synergy things to look at. But the overarching kind of things, that falls to a coach. And now we have coaches who are going to be able to guide them in terms of, picks and bans and what that means. You have Riot explicitly saying, players need to listen to these guys, and we're going to learn very quickly what teams do and do not. Because that first fight where a coach is saying pick something and a player just chooses not to do it is going to be visible. It will be recorded, and it'll be a story, whether it works or not. It's going to add a more depth and more different types of kind of looking at the game, I guess, which, given what they're doing for Season 5, actually makes a lot of sense. I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to just make things better and smarter, I guess, more than anything else.
And Reasony, this has to make you happy too, right? Because now you get a chance to get, like, this is like paying coaches and stuff.
Well, okay, so for the paying coaches stuff, I really love the paying coaches stuff because, you got 25K to the head coach, even though you have to be physically there. But
Isn't it 12?
Is it 12?
It's 12.5.
12.5 per
Sorry.
split, I believe.
Per split, or 25 a year.
Yeah.
Add it together because 12.5 plus another 12.5 to the support staff, right? If I remember correctly. Sorry, in total of 25, you have that much budget, even though it's not that much, but some organization can pay a lot more. I just feel like as long as they try to look out for people that aren't pro player previously, that it'll be fine. I do want to talk about the pick and ban phase, like coaches join the pick and ban phase a little bit more though, because like we always talk about how coaches want to be in the pick and ban phase with the players and such and such. I do want to mention that part of this is gonna be like we can evaluate coaches more in that aspect, but I don't think we're gonna see that much different of pick and ban phase actually, because this sounds weird. So what I just feel is kind of empty about this. Where like even though I like this, I like this implementation of coaches joining here. They probably could provide a lot more like some kind of really good intelligence into the pick and ban phase and such. But I just feel like it's kind of like there's a loss of something there, because what we do previously as coaches is we try to coach how players should think during pick and ban phase, during first rotation, second rotation, third rotation, and we have basically you kind of train players to actually understand how pick and ban phase work, rather than just tell them, oh, how to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a little bit more of an education in that regard. So I just feel like future teams won't have that chance to kind of educate their players. So in a sense, it's gonna be easier for teams, but I just feel like it's gonna maybe pull like top tier teams a little bit closer to the bottom tier teams, if that makes sense, because that education is not there anymore.
Because you're trying to teach them to think analytically about the game and prompt them to make their own judgments. So that way, it's kind of like if you have a like in animation, we talked about this a lot today. The tools of animation are constantly changing, like computer CGI or whatever. So as an animation major, you're taught the basics, like paper and pencil animation. So that way, no matter how the tools change, and the analogies for League of Legends, it's the patches changing. You always go back to your basic information so you can help relearn. So if you take away the learning ability from like the players of being analytical about champion select by having a coach like sit over and like hold their dick for them, like obviously you're losing that ability there. So I get it.
That's a really good metaphor.
And yeah, especially with newer teams. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it's going to be a balance, right? It's going to be a matter of organizations finding the mix between them, because a player like Lemonation is never going to put away his notebook. That's just never going to happen. He's always going to want some role in picks and bans, and any organization like Cloud9 would be very silly, I guess, to put in a coach that would try to take that away from them. I think it's going to be more of a joint effort if it's going to work. It's going to be coaches bouncing off of what players understand and then using that to make something new. That's why I go deeper. I go different rather than deeper. I think if you just trust the coaches because the coaches know all, you're setting yourself in an equal position to fail, because in the long run, the players lose out on that understanding. But I don't think the best organizations will do that.
It also holds the coaches a lot more accountable. Like it emphasizes having local coaches. Like Monte Cristo, as far as like the CLG experiment would not be acceptable here because the head coach has to be there. But also like if pick ban goes terribly wrong, like you now have fingers to point at. Like before you could say, oh, is it the coaching the problem? Is the players the problem? Like now it's that guy fucked that up.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right, sorry everyone for our technical difficulties.
Okay, there we go.
We're streaming. The computer crashed on us, so we're up again. And to pick up where we left off, we're talking about Incarnation remaining permabanned, and is this justified? Like, what he has done in the past still necessary? Is it still necessary to keep him permabanned? Like, do we think this is justified? Do you guys feel like? I mean, I don't know how much you know about Incarnation's permaban originally, but do you feel like he should still be permabanned?
Well, we had a good debate on this show. It was actually me and Chase who had the debate a few times ago. Now, like I said, if there's any evidence that he was still doing some bad things, he should remain banned. And apparently there is evidence that he's been doing some bad things, so he should remain banned. I don't really have a problem with that. But I do find it quite amusing that Riot has now created that loophole for him to get unbanned. Whereas before they would have had to be like, oh, we're reneging a permanent ban. Now they've literally defined an indefinite ban, which is a contradiction in itself because indefinite does not mean a definition of this. You can't have a definition of an indefinite ban. It's kind of ridiculous. But besides that point, at least now they've given themselves a way to unban him if he doesn't account share or elo boost or whatever else he was accused of.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest problem I had in condoning the idea of unbanning him is that I felt like people wanted just him, and it was just because he happened to be really good. And then, oh, by the way, he seems like he's been a much nicer guy, so let's, also take that into account. And what I said on that episode was that if they wanted to unban Incarnation, they had to really go in, evaluate how they were going to handle all these players, change how this process worked, and apply it to everybody. And you know what? That's what they did. Darkwind Jax, who nobody wants back, who nobody has any problem being permanently banned forever, also got his reevaluation. And people can say that that was a token whatever because they had to, but the point is that they did it. They're treating all these cases fairly. This is the way they want their game going forward. And if that's what Riot wants, then that's awesome. I love the idea of a redemption story. I love the idea of him, playing it by the rules, being nice, working within the grounds that Riot's given him, and finding his way back in. That's an awesome thing if he manages to keep up his good behavior in the long run. And the fact that other players have that opportunity too, I think that's not necessarily a negative, given that the punishment of being at least a year out of esports if you're receiving that definite ban that indefinite ban, I should say, is still too long that players could just shrug it aside and be like, it's no big deal. You still have to be really terrible to do it, and it's still going to be really, really bad if you get it, because 1 year out of esports for most players is career suicide. So I'm happy with the changes they made, honestly.
Do you think that the changes they made were purely because of his behavior, or do you think it has more to do with PR and the concern that you have this player who hasn't been in the past really, really toxic coaching a professional team, and maybe they just don't want him near there?
I don't think that was it at all. I think as far as a PR move is concerned, Riot has had a reputation of being a reactionary company. And like Chase and Dave said, they hit the nail on the head. People were upset about the Incarnation thing because they wanted a redemption. One of the biggest complaints was he was so young. You effectively ruined his esports career as far as League of Legends is concerned by banning him indefinitely for things that a stupid kid. It was always the stupid kid. He can redeem himself. And that's exactly what Riot gave him. They gave them a system where it's through review, so they can come back and they can fix it. So the PR, as far as Riot's standpoint there, is good. The one thing that I'm kind of curious about is if you look at his offenses that got him when they did the review and kept him permabanned, it was, I think, 4 total offenses, and all of them were in 2013, and only one is in 2014. So, and take in context that we're about to come on to 2015. We've almost finished up this year. We're in December now. And it was account sharing. It didn't say anything else about the account sharing. It just said account sharing. And this was different from the issue in 2013 that had the what is it called? Refer a friend, where he was abusing that. I think there was bots, DDoSing, refer a friend, and account sharing. So I'm very curious what the actual, because if you're talking about a redemption story, that's a whole year of nothing happening for someone. And arguably, they said actually factually on his review that his behavior in game as far as toxicity had completely gone away, that he was a much better and nicer player to perform with, which you have to think that he was originally banned for DDoSing and toxicity, and he was reported by his peers effectively because he's being toxic in high ELO games. So it makes sense that he would be banned from the game and then also not be able to play in competitive play, because a lot of the people who probably reported him are in that level of professional play. But I'm just really curious. I would like to know what the account sharing thing was and if that justifies being banned, because I think he's still banned until he comes back in review for Summer Split.
Well, and one of the things that they said on that was that we have ascertained all of this information through our own means, and they never give more information than that, it feels like. And occasionally they'll give you a screenshot of a post game chat or something, but they never give you more than that. So I'm curious if I don't really expect them to show like how they get this information, but it would be nice if that information was like actually presented and those charges weren't just like listed without really any supporting evidence. It feels like, not that I think that Riot is lying, just that I would like to see that sort of information.
Yeah, I would too, but I think their claim is always that, well, if we tell you the statistics that we get that prove he's cheating, then cheaters will know the statistics we're looking for that implicate cheating, and therefore they can better avoid those said like statistics. You know what I mean? They can better manage avoiding those statistics. I think like I agree with you. I'd also like to see them give some more evidence so that, because I like this incarnation thing, like the way account sharing. What do you mean? Like, was he physically was he really sharing accounts? Did one of his friends play on his account so it didn't decay one game? There's kind of a big difference in that. Like, I mean, technically it's still the same thing, but like, it would be nice to have some actual convincing evidence to go along with it to see, oh, he's clearly still DDoSing or something. But the question is, what evidence can Riot actually provide that wouldn't aid cheaters in being able to cheat more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, with account sharing, it's one of those things that seems innocuous enough that they would be able to share at least a couple more details about that particular one. But you're then setting a precedent of, we are going to explain every, one of these offenses as they come up. And there are certain things that you just don't want people to know. I mean, you made the point that people can learn from these things, and it does change their behavior on how they try to beat the system. And we've seen that. I mean, I don't know if you know the book Super Freakonomics, but they'd had this great chapter about why suicide bombers should buy life insurance. This whole idea being that, they're not going to, people that don't have life insurance are obviously, maybe that's, one thing you could look for as a discerning factor, because obviously if they were a suicide bomber, they wouldn't be cashing in on it. Turns out that what they were actually doing is putting that idea in suicide bombers' heads, and they caught a whole bunch of them who just so happened to sign up for some life insurance right after that book came out, which was really interesting. That you can manipulate people's behavior that way if you just give them anything to go on. And when it comes to something like DDoSing or scripting or any of the potential crimes that, in-game crimes, I should say, that come up, that's dangerous to your community. It's the same reason they never want to advertise these things on the subreddit either. So I get why they're keeping it as it is, but I think asking a year of a clean record for a guy who was permabanned is not crazy. It was early 2014. By summer split, it will have been over a year. A year of clean behavior, yeah, you can come back in the game. I think that's a reasonable thing for a player with the amount of DDoS attacks that he did to have to do.
There's also evidence that Riot was communicating with him like throughout this process. He streams in his AMA back in October, so a month earlier to his review. He was asked directly, like, why don't you? It somehow came out like, why isn't your stream monetized? And he blatantly said, I don't monetize my stream because it's kind of like by Riot's good graces that I'm even allowed to play the game right now due to my ban status, and I don't want to make any money off of their good graces to me. So there is some sort of, I guess, semi-communication going on there that he's allowed to stream, he's allowed to play the game still.
Mm-hmm. And it's odd to me that this permanent ban, that now that you've said that this that he's allowed to stream and play the game at all, but not allowed to play in this competitive sense, and especially because, like you mentioned earlier, all these charges are so old. I'm wondering what Riot is waiting for as far as unbanning him, like what they're waiting to see, if there is anything, or if maybe they're just like, we just want 2 years without DDoSing or any implications in that, or maybe they just. I just don't know. At this point, I feel like there's just too many unanswered questions in this issue. And there's a lot of evidence that would suggest that he has reformed, and Riot has admitted, that his behavior is better. And for me, that's all I was really concerned about. But then again, I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot more people who are worried about like this botting issue, and it's not something that Riot wants to promote, obviously, something that abuses their own system.
But if we just like back up and look at it and say like, we like that Riot implemented a system that allows redemption to happen as a review system instead of like a permanent system. We like the fact that Riot is obviously having communication with Arcanation as far as allowing him to stream and not punishing that. But we are curious, or we don't think that Riot is making the great call because it just says account sharing. Like, there's almost like two sides of it. Like, Riot has done well, as far as my opinion, Riot has done really well as far as handling these ban issues and being fairly transparent with it in their records so far, that I don't feel like ticking them on the last box like, well, we don't know what this definitely defines, so.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think there's only so much we can expect of them, right? Like, in terms of like I said earlier, anything that you really give out is just going to help people avoid the game, the system better. And to an extent, I mean, they don't really have a reason to lie. Like, he's a good player, he's a talented player. I'm sure they want him back in the LCS so they can market him as another Ocelot who's reformed his behavior. Like, Riot wants that story. Trust me, that's what they want. So.
Oh yeah, the montage is going to be incredible, right?
Oh, for sure, it's going to be insane. So I don't think there's any like reason for them to be nefarious in the situation. There's no motive that would drive that. If that makes sense.
And I think that's fair. Does anyone else have anything I want to add about Incarnation or bans in general? All right.
No.
So moving forward, we've had a ton of roster news. So we missed a week. So obviously we have like 2 weeks of roster news here to talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about is SK. And the 2 new players that they have is they have Fox in the mid lane, notable challenger player. And then in the bot lane, they have Forgiven, notable complainer, theoretical god tier 80 carry that has never quite shown up. I don't know. I'm excited to see these changes. I'm really curious as to how Forgiven is going to mesh. What do you guys think?
Well, Forgiven is definitely an upgrade over Candy Panda, right? Like, I think everybody would agree that talent-wise.
Talent-wise, yes. What I'm worried though. You wanna go first, sorry?
Oh no, I was just go for it.
Because SK, I never heard their team comp, right? But because as someone who is really emphasize a lot on the team communication, SK does look like season 4 SK did look like the team that focuses on team communication a lot, because you can say that they are strong on all positions or something like that. There are like only a couple of positions are really strong mechanically or something. So team communication was really good on that team. That's what I believe. So I'm not sure how much input did Jazzes and Candy Panda had on that team. So what I'm worried about, like, because whenever you do roster change, right? Hello, I'm still here. Okay. Whenever you do roster change, you also not only you worry about mechanics, you also worry about is their personality, is there are they going to be able to communicate the same? What, like, their personality, their psychology, how is it going to affect the team? Like, I'm curious to see how Forgiven and Fox, this guy, I have no clue about this guy, because he's replacing Jesus. I'm guessing that Jesus and Candy Panda didn't have that much communication in that team. I'm not sure about that. So, in terms of, SK may or may not lose that kind of like strategic image in the future. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, that's possible because of strategy, for sure.
I think with SK, a lot of the strategy came from N-Rated, who's obviously been a veteran in the scene, very intelligent player, knows what he's doing, and has been doing it for long enough that he's gotten that kind of respect. I think
that's when they got good, right? When he joined.
Yeah, when he joined, that was the big thing. They almost lost that series to Super Hot Crew to even be in the LCS back in the spring, and then they lost Nif, who got signed by Alliance. They brought in N-Rated, and the team chemistry improved significantly. I'm really high on What the Fox. I feel like he's Jez's with a higher upside. He was on their SK Gaming Prime team, the original incarnation. So they've worked with him before. They know exactly what he is. They know how he meshes as a personality and what kind of skills he brings to the team. So I think that is probably the move I'm higher on. Forgiven, my thing about Forgiven is that I'm a firm believer of the too many knuckleheads theory that Bill Simmons espouses whenever he talks about professional sports. You can have one guy in a locker room who's got an ego, who's got a personality, and you could say a strong personality, let's say. But you can't do 2. As soon as you start having 2, you have an issue. And this team now has Forgiven as the AD carry and Svenskeren as the jungler. And both of these guys are outspoken guys who have histories of getting aggressive with their teammates when things don't go their way, and have had personality issues, have had their names come up in conversations like, toxic towards teammates and whatever else. And now we have both those guys on the same team. If that team does well, awesome. The potential skill level that Forgiven brings is great. But if that team starts off slow, chemistry could be a huge issue for these guys, and that's something that's a genuine concern looking at the piece as a whole.
Normally, I'd agree with you, but there's just two small things that I think make this situation a tiny bit different. One is that if you look at their play styles, they're going to be like, this is going to be a match made in heaven. Forgiven is like, give me everything, let me carry you. And Svenskeren is like, I like invading the other jungler and camping bot because I can get double kill bot, and that's lots of gold. So literally, they're going to be like, it's like going to be like a match made in heaven. The jungler always wants to camp bot. The AD carry always wants the jungler to camp bot. They're just going to give each other a big hug. They're going to be like, we don't have to fight about anything. We have the exact same plan. This is wonderful. Like and in the other sense, I'm not sure, but Forgiven, from what I heard, the complaints really started and the complaints really stemmed, and at least this is what he said on Summoning Insight, was that the complaints really stemmed from the fact that people weren't working as hard as him. He was dedicated, really, really dedicated, and the Copenhagen Wolves team really was just wanted to stay in the LCS. SK seems like a team that wants to win the LCS, and I think if he sees his teammates are motivated, he might not be as toxic as we all have him out to be, if that makes sense.
The potential is there for sure.
Yeah,
I think the big thing.
Every player says that, though.
That's true.
In the limited pool of challenger players that I've worked with, every single player has always said this complaint of, I was giving 110% and my teammates weren't doing it, so this is why I left the team, or this is why this issue came up. I think a big issue, though, that needs to be addressed, and kind of touching back to like what Reasoning and what Chase were also going off of, is Inrated also said on Summoning Insight that their style of shot calling, like, yes, everyone associates him as being like the brains of SK, is very diplomatic, apparently. Like when Thorin was really trying to nail down like who's your shot caller, he was like, oh, we take a vote. Everyone makes these calls. And so what Reasoning was saying in the beginning is even if you look at a team like SK and you can, arguably you can point out like this is the weakest link here, what that player's weak parts are. You know how to play with it, you know how to work around it. And SK was fairly successful in doing that. They went to Worlds. If they had not had issues with Svenskeren, they probably would have gone a lot farther. They were a very formidable team kind of at that point there. So they know like how to make up for this. By taking another player like Forgiven, and now you take another player like Fox, you don't know these players' issues. And issues will always arise. It always looks like the easy short-term goal to just upgrade, to find a different roster and to move forward as far as skill. But like you have to relearn what these players' dynamics are. How do they think? What are their personalities? What do they like to do? Is this going to redefine the play style of the team? Like, I'm not super good at EU, so I can't really state like what SK or what Candy Panda's specific play style is. But does Forgiven match that first and foremost? Like the Candy in rated line, is that the same as the in rated Forgiven lane? Like,
no, that'll be very different because the mechanical ceiling of the AD carry is so much higher now that they can afford to be more aggressive,
what about
right?
So aggressive playstyle versus was Candy Panda more reserved?
Yeah, I'd say that's
right?
fair.
Okay,
yeah,
so that completely changes the dynamic of a team and how they're going to figure out that early game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but
that's going to be
It's like to camp bot, right? Like that's the thing. Is Svenskeren loves always camp that lane, and if you can't Forgiven, now you've got
more.
It depended on the matchup, but he liked to get that bot lane ahead because Jesus was very good at holding his own. This is why I don't really buy the fact that Fox is going to be better than Jesus. Like, I mean, it might be true. I'm not that big of an expert on European challenger scene. I'm not going to lie about that. It's not like I watch every single game. So I mean, maybe Fox is this mid lane god that's willing to come in. Maybe Chase can lighten us, but I don't think that like he'll just immediately be better than Jesus. He played pretty well, and people are saying, oh, he got crapped on at Worlds, but like, yeah, think about who he's playing there. He's playing some of the best players in the world. He's not playing like mid-tier LCS teams. You know what I mean?
Jesus was a mid-tier LCS mid laner. I mean, I think he's showing on Coast right now how good he can be when up against challenger talent. I think What the Fox is
as he
kind of at the same skill
talent.
level. I mean, I would say he was. I mean, I think he and I feel like he and Jesus are pretty equal in terms of where they are now. But the thing is, we've only seen What the Fox, play under this SK banner for a few months now. He's a younger talent. He's got more to learn, and so I think he can get better. Jesus, I feel like we've seen him long enough. He's been in the scene for a couple of years now. I feel like we know what Jesus is, and I guess that's the difference if you're looking at SK. The two are actually very similar in play style. I think I like What the Fox's Assassins a little bit more than just as his Ahri is great, but I think he defaults to things like Ziggs, whereas I think we see different things from What the Fox. But I think as a general rule, we're going to see that's a potential upgrade. I don't think it's going to be an upgrade right away for sure. And so it's going to be up to Forgiven and
What is Fox's champion pool?
I would say, I mean, I'm thinking his Ahri is really good.
Well, the thing
His
is, I think,
Syndra's good.
For Jesus is that the meta, especially around Worlds, kind of shifted out of the mage favored. Like, obviously, Ahri is still very strong because she's, like, versatile in what she can do. She's kind of like that assassin mid hybrid. Anytime you, like, combine two of those terms, you have a stronger champion theoretically. And we're kind of seeing the swing back of Xerath. But I think around Worlds, it was really about, you know, that assassin mid laner. And that was kind of also the fall of those hyper carries in the bot lane, like Kog'Maw, which is why you had to have Twitch, because if you have like a Zed mid lane and a Kog'Maw bottom, like that Zed's just going to jump on Kog'Maw and like eliminate him. So I think it was almost unfortunate for Jesus going into Worlds that if he's a mage player mid, which a lot of European mids historically are very much more favored to like the Oriannas and things like that, like it almost rotated out of his comfort zone or his strong points.
Absolutely. And that's where I don't want to, obviously we've only seen one split from What the Fox, and it was during that same kind of time that you're talking about. So whether he will prove to be the upgrade that they think he can be, time will tell. I think Jesus right now is seeing what life could be like if he's in a friendlier meta environment. I think his games on Coast have been very impressive. And I think that he and Impaler have much better synergy, I would say, than he and Svenskeren did. Obviously, Impaler asked for Jesus to come in, so they've clearly got an out-of-game connection that's translating well to what's actually being seen on the Rift. I think that move is one that can benefit both Jesus and What the Fox in the long run, because I really do think that Jesus is going to be happier where he is right now. But I do really wonder how much patience a player like Svenskeren or Forgiven is going to show a player like What the Fox, who is going to be rawer early. And while he has the potential to be really, really good, that's talent that's going to need to be cultivated. And we don't know. I mean, SK obviously as an organization has been around for a long time. They've clearly shown that they are able to, cultivate talent. But can they do it in this kind of environment when they're already trying to balance as many personalities as they have? That's going to be interesting. It will be an interesting team to watch, and I really can't wait to see them work together.
Well, I'm particularly hopeful for SK because, I mean, they're one of the few teams that staffs, like, for however much time, an esports psychologist or a sports psychologist in general, and they have, really adamantly said that this is something they think is very, very important. So I think if there's any team where these two players can come in and, regardless of their performance, start to mesh with the team, it's probably on SK. So while I think no matter what, you're probably going to be right that What the Fox is not going to come out guns blazing, he will probably suffer in the first few weeks or in the first few months even. I think in the long run, they can develop a stronger roster because I do think that we, like you said, we know who Jesus is. We know what he plays. But What the Fox, I believe at this point, probably has that higher skill ceiling and can probably become, and I hate the idea of potential, but he does have, the potential, as a CLG fan, potential is just an awful word. But he does have that potential to be better and to be, a better mid laner. But yeah, is he going to survive the Svenskeren Forgiven, like, doubleheader? I don't know. But I'm excited to see it, and I'm leaning towards yes. I like this SK roster a lot.
Yeah, I do too. It's gonna be strong. I think very strong.
So the other EU news that we have to go over basically at this point is, for at least for roster changes, is officially Alliance has a new AD carry now. Surprise, surprise! Like most of this roster news. So
I wish I still had my balloon. Celebrate.
How do we feel about this shift for the team? Do we think there's going to be a good mesh here? Do we think it's going to work well for them? It's kind of the same thing we do with SK. What do we expect here?
I don't really see, like, for me, this is kind of the same situation as SK where Jesus gets thrown under the bus, sort of, in a way. Like, he's like a presumed because of, I mean, I guess he did show that he wasn't going to be able to play at the world's level, or maybe just had a bad tournament, I don't know. But again, like, I didn't feel like Tabs was the issue. I honestly thought Wicked was the issue with that team. When I watched them at Worlds, Wicked was the problem. That was just my perspective on it. He was the person who really had gaps in his game, first and foremost, on that squad. And Shook had a few shaky games as well. Like, he had really, really good games and some iffy games. So I wouldn't have, like, I didn't think that Tabs needed to go. So I mean, maybe there's some personal issues, maybe that's affecting the whole team synergy and everything, but I didn't think that was the primary area of focus that needed to be fixed. But Reckless is a good player. So
From
we'll
from
see.
what I know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Reckless is really good. And if you're a team like Alliance and your goal is to win it all, win the world championship, and you have the opportunity to get a player like Reckless for really cheap, because the way that contract was set up, he was able to get out of that contract for, I think it was like 50,000, was it? They were able to sign him away, which is a crazy, insane deal for a player that was given the MVP for Europe in the summer split.
Oh, yeah, he's really good.
He's probably the MVP of the spring split as well. And, I think we saw from Tabs' Ask FM post that he wasn't in a particularly happy environment for him on that team. It just, for whatever reason, he just said he never felt comfortable with the personalities. And the owner of Alliance has kind of gone on the record on the Reddit post about how when he was making this move, the first thing in his mind was, I need a roster that meshes personality-wise. And while people could point to someone like Wicked, he even explicitly mentioned Wicked as a player that, are there more talented players on a mechanical level out there? Probably. Would they do what he wants to have for the dynamic of this team? No. And so I kind of trust Alliance's decision on this. I think Reckles is a strong enough player that even if he somehow would be a worse match for the team chemistry-wise than Tabs, which I don't foresee happening, there's still just too much talent to say anything negative about this pick. I think it'll work just fine because I think Reckles is going to work wherever you put him.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure.
No, I agree as well. So moving to international information, obviously we now are pretty confirmed that 4 of my favorite players have moved to China. Imp, Heart, Mata, and Dandy have all moved over. And I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. It makes me sad because OGN won't be as exciting for me, but am I excited to watch?
Happy.
Yeah, I'm going to be excited to watch China
so
this
happy.
season.
I'm so happy.
Why don't you talk to us about the teams that they ended, or the team that they ended up on, and like what is this? What is happening?
It's already pretty common knowledge, although Reddit seems to kind of hit or miss on like what's happening. Wish there was a show that talked about this every week. That'd be awesome. No.
They should call it China Talk.
I think they should call
that'd
it
be a good
China
name for
Talk.
it.
Who named it that, by the way?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, so just out aside, there's a lot of Korean players that are coming over. Why is this important? Obviously, because they're getting paid more, following the money, whatever. But the issue is now Lace, and Lace is the governing bada. I'm thinking of like body and Mata. The governing body, they're effectively KESPA of China. So they control the league. They've started to implement the one-team rule for an organization. Now, why is this important? In reference to like the Korean players, like people, they see that, and then I think immediately Reddit was like, oh, that's a low impact rule, because you'd like, oh, it's only World Elite and World Elite Academy. That's not a low impact rule. A lot of these LPL organizations and these teams own like 4 spots, like so many multiple teams, and if you buy more than 4 Korean players due to the 2/3 rule, that means either Korean talent is being sold off like cattle, or someone's getting benched and just riding the season on the bench. Like, that's effectively what that means. So if you care about these Korean players that are coming over, you care about this 1/5 or this one team rule for organization, because that's directly who it affects, as well as really talented Chinese players. And it isn't just World Elite and World Elite Academy. I think it limits to 1 LPL team and 1 LSPL team. Right now, EDG and OMG, they own like 3 or 4 teams. So, and they have like 6 Korean players. So, just do the math on that of how quickly they're going to have to start shuffling stuff around. It even impacted the roster. Typically, the roster trade season is to December 5th. But because of this rule and everyone's kind of like scattering now, they extended it to December 7th. So also, like, all of these rumors keep breaking that, like, oh, Dandy's going here, or Rookie's going here, or Cacao is going here. None of this is 100%. Until that roster locked, and then of course Lace can fine teams, but it doesn't even matter because their fines are so astronomically small in context of how much money these organizations are making. Kelsey once made the comment that between Invictus Gaming and Starhorn Royal Club, they were joking about buying a player just because they have so much money. Like, I'll just buy PDD from you. And Invictus Gaming's owner came back and said, if you buy PDD from me, I'll buy Uzi from you. So, like, how do you want to play this game? And of course, Lace would fine both of them for trading outside of the roster season. Ikono could even try to bench one of the players, but that's like, what, $60,000, which sounds a lot to us, but to these contracts that are coming up to $300,000, $500,000, $1 million being offered to Faker. PDD has a $1.6 million streaming contract. They don't give a fuck. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
so Lace standing on this is like really big, but it's now, can they implement this? Because this rule has been there. It just hasn't been enforced. Like, the age restriction has been there. It just hasn't been enforced. The 3-fist rule is being enforced very well. But just FYI to the Daily Dot, China was one of the first regions to implement this after the Starhole Royal Club thing and all of the primed Optimist players coming over to China. But no, like, Reddit needs to pay attention. This is not low impact. This doesn't affect just World Elite and World Elite Academy. All of these Korean players that you like and you love and are coming over to China, this rule directly impacts them. They could be very screwed by this rule.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I was excited about was that a lot of these players from, old teams were still going to get to play together. And one of the things that we see a lot when teams import like individual Korean players, especially when NA does it, is that they don't mesh with teams. Like, they don't have that. But I feel like when you import like 3 players or 2 players together, or, import like 2 Korean players and a Korean coach, like Mata expressed interest in coaching, it's a lot easier for them to mesh with the team. Whereas, like if you import just Seraph onto CLG and then have the only person he can really like, who knows him very well, who's Monte Cristo, also overseas, like, what do you expect from a player in that situation? And what do you expect from, like Dandy if you just throw him on a random team, or Imp if you just throw him on a random team? Obviously, he's a very good AD carry, but I mean, without like Mata being there and level-headed to like tell him not to go in, like, he could throw his career in the dumpster really easily.
I think that that's a very valid point, and I think people and it even extends to SK roster that we were just talking about. Like, it's very easy to look at that, and you can analytically say, well, Forgiven, he's better at this, this, and this than Candy Panda. Like, you can weigh it and you can make projections, but again, like, all of these things, communication, personality, team flow, that reason he was talking about, these all come into effect. We saw it with Starhorn Royal Club at the beginning of, and we say it over and over and over again in LPL, like, at the beginning of the season, Starhorn Royal Club was awful, and they made it to the final, so obviously it started to click. But a lot of these dream teams, like when people look at Vici Gaming and they're just like, oh, you're gonna have Vasily and Mata and Dandy, and Cool might possibly sign for them, and maybe they'll have, I don't know, V or someone as their top laner, I don't know, like, just something crazy. Like, they just, oh, wow, this is going to be awesome, not realizing that, okay, Mata was the primary shot caller for his team, and is he going to be the primary shot caller of this Chinese team? Is the communication going to be the same? Does he have a certain style? Like, these superstars might not look so superstar-y.
Yeah, people tend to put players, I feel like, in a vacuum. Like, oh my God, like Madlife was the best. He could never miss a hook. Like, it doesn't matter what team you put him on. He's the best. But like, really, it's a 5-player team. Every single one of those players has to click, or your team isn't going to perform. And yes, mechanical skill is very, very, very important. But like, there's tons of mechanical players. It's a lot harder to find people who are going to mesh well and who are going to perform under pressure and perform consistently.
Well, the problem with rating League players is that there's things that you can measure, like mechanics and stuff like that, and then there's intangibles that you just can't, like teamwork and like how good are you at reading other people. Like, there's game sense, which is you can kind of like I could rate your game sense on a 1 to 10 scale, but it's pretty hard to rate like how good are you at dealing with communication issues with a teammate, and how good are you at like discussing things with your, like, solving conflicts and being a good teammate, being a good housemate, and all these things. Like, these are all different things that are like impossible to weigh or analyze or even probably know unless you're on the team, right? So it's one of those things where it's really hard, like, to judge a team unless you're in it, in that sense, or judge players unless you really know them, like really know them.
You won't know till you're there. I mean, all these things are experiments, and everyone kind of looked at Starhorn Royal Club as the quintessential example of, look what we can do. We can literally just buy our way into the championship finals by bringing in these Korean players, and we can talk with, they'll just do the smart ping thing and it'll be great. But I mean, lightning doesn't always strike twice, and it's right now we have a huge amount of history saying that communication matters, that finding a way to talk amongst your team and make the right shot calls, and have those kind of, the inner team synergy, good chemistry, all that stuff matters. And we have one team that right now stands as an outlier that says you could throw whoever you want on there as long as they're mechanically awesome, they can figure out smart pings and make it work. There is no way that every single one of these experiments works. There's certainly no way all these experiments are going to work now that there's this one team, this one team rule. And I have no idea. I mean, this is where I turn to you, Fusker. Like, where can we expect these, I guess, to put it in a very dehumanizing way, surplus Korean players to go? Like, are they just gonna, if they are stuck riding the bench, are they going to be financially all right, or is this like a legitimate concern? Like, where do you see it going from here?
I mean, I have no doubt that they'll probably be financially taken care of. I'm sure that most teams are probably trying to unload them, which is why I don't want to say, like, you notice how when he asked me, like, where are these players going, I didn't say any team names, because I can't, like, no one can say anything, because it was 100% that Dandy was going to this team, and suddenly he's on, like, a different team, and, saves confirmed, or things like that, but, money talks. Like, I'll buy Uzi I. I'm just going to throw $1 million at him. I'll break that contract fee. So not say anything like that, but I have no doubt that if these players do ride the bench, that I don't think they're going to be like stranded in Shanghai. Like Dandy's going to wake up in like an ice bathtub, missing some organs, and have to like claw his way back to Korea or anything like that. But it could be feasibly that he just, he sits on a bench. We don't get to see him play, or a talented Chinese player, because I'm an advocate that I personally don't think that China needed Korean imports to make it better. In fact, I don't even think that China's the best region right now. People are constantly asking, like, oh, do you think China's going to be the #1 region now that it has all this Korean-esque talent? No, I'm pretty sure Korea's still going to kick everyone's ass because they know how to, like, execute their talent, but whatever.
You're probably right about that.
Can I ask two things? Can I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, like, I think I'm missing on something because I have no clue how this one team thing is going to work when. So let's say EDGF, after playing spring season and they get into LPL, what happens next?
You have to sell it.
They have to sell it.
Sell it to another person.
Do like an EG or alliance thing, I think, where they make like an umbrella corporation or like a dummy corporation.
They just made that illegal.
Did
They
they?
just they made this huge branding thing where they're not allowed. Both of those teams are going to change their names because they're not allowed to have any branding associated with that organization. So Alliance and EG are going to be called something else soon enough. But
And the
yeah,
Chinese,
you're not allowed to do that anymore.
And the Chinese rule was pretty specific because the shareholders can't be the same. So if you make a dummy corporation, then you would technically have the shareholder of that corporation be the same as the shareholder. So you know what I mean? Like you can't. They actually nailed it down on this.
Not
one.
that
Like,
not
I don't
that
think
it's
there's much
still
way around this.
It's not still impossible. It's just significantly more difficult.
Yeah, it's much more
and-
difficult now. You need a dummy person, basically. You would need somebody to be like sign the. You know what I mean? You would need like I need to get my random friend Bob, and be like, hey Bob, you're gonna sign this. You're gonna own this corporation, and I'm gonna pay you like 10% of the profit or something from it. And this is your job now. And you.
For you to own two teams.
Well, if
is
shady
Basically.
backroom stuff is gonna go down, I guarantee you it'll go down in China.
Yeah.
It's sadly true.
But I mean, the
yes,
short
that
answer
is
is
fair.
they have to sell the teams.
That almost like promotes like a team not winning though. You almost wouldn't want your second team to win LSPL like that. I always thought that we're going the wrong way. I thought that instead of making every organization have one team, I preferred the sister team, the bigger organizations, the better. You know, that's just how I preferred. I thought it was better for breeding better competition because you had somebody who is a practice dummy. You can help them. They can help you. You can both get better. I thought that was a better system. I don't really like the fact that we're going to inflict this one team rule everywhere.
Wow.
All right.
He
Okay.
agrees.
So one last piece of roster news I want to talk about before we move on to the games that occurred this week. So last night we found out that Flame has left CJ and that Ambition is moving to the jungle. So first off, like Ambition moving to the jungle I think is whatever, but Flame leaving CJ is pretty big, and he has mentioned that he doesn't want to leave Korea. So my question at this point is, where is he going to go, and like what team would Flame really fit on?
It's interesting because he has made the comment that he doesn't want to leave, but every single pro player or whatever else I've heard talking about it has been making Evil Geniuses references. Or have like that. I remember one guy, he made a post and he capitalized the E and the G, and those were the only capital letters in the entire thing. There have been a few kind of similar tweets like that, and I don't know if they're just trying to prank people or whatever else, but we do know that Inox has left the Evil Geniuses organization, that Helios has a connection with Flame for obvious reasons because they used to play together back in the day, and they currently are a team that could handle bringing in another foreign player.
They're also
And
a very
so
wealthy
it's
organization.
currently
They have a lot of money.
They're currently in Korea.
Oh yeah,
We're
also
going to be in Korea boot camping. Like
I'm just saying
They're
there are
not
a
there
lot
yet,
of things
sorry.
that are falling in line such that if Flame were ever
Yeah.
going to renege on the whole not wanting to leave Korea thing, now would be the time, especially because, I mean, we just saw the preseason Korea rosters announced, and he wasn't on any of them. And if he was going to be playing in Korea, you would think that someone would have put him on at least as a sub just to have his name down there. So I'm
Well,
not
he'll get
saying
picked
it's geniuses, but there are some interesting things that point in that direction if you're looking for a potential where does this go from here.
And I mean, this has been this was pretty much just announced. So I imagine that if he's going to move somewhere in Korea, we will know very, very quickly, probably within the week, if someone is going to pick him up. Because I mean, obviously, he's a very, very talented player, and I don't know if he would click on any team, but it seems like he's good enough that he probably would, and he could probably. I don't know. I'm not going to talk too much about Flame because I love that player far too much, and I would just talk him up to the point where
you and I both, buddy. And I understand.
Yeah. But I feel like there's nothing he would do well no matter what.
I have a hard time seeing him not playing next split. I feel like you'd be pretty crazy even as a bad team. If you're one of the lower teams in Korea, whoever's the top laner, I'm sorry, goodbye. Unless your top laner is like a rising star and you really believe in him, just like, no, we can get Flame. We can all of a sudden have a fan base. Like, can you imagine what that would do for a smaller organization?
It's just absurd.
I'm just trying to think about what he would do if you put him on that Huya Tigers team right now.
That might be interesting. I was thinking that
Instead
too.
of Sneb. Like, I mean,
All right.
you'd have Flame, Lee, Kuro, Prey, and Gorilla, which,
Gorilla,
say what
yeah.
you will about Prey, he didn't play a great series this past
He
weekend.
played pretty
but
bad, to be honest.
it was not good. But if you add Flame to that roster goes from could upset some people on a weird day to a sneaky decent team. A team that
Yeah.
actually could make its way to the top 5, top 4 maybe even. It'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
You've pretty much given me the perfect transition. So let's talk about this OGN seed qualifier, these qualifiers to get into OGN. Obviously, we came in with a couple teams, and we left with the two teams that qualified, Huya Tigers, which you just talked about, and then Incredible Miracle. So let's talk about these teams. Let's talk about these lineups as they stand. You got a little bit into Huya and how you weren't a big fan of Prey's performance, and for the most part, I would agree. But I would say that I was surprised with how well they did, and their performance and their qualifying over Zenix was a huge thing for me. So how do you feel about Huya making it in? How do you feel about the Zenix lineup and not qualifying for OGN this year?
I wasn't as surprised about Zenix. I mean, this was a roster that had a lot of interesting challenger level talent on it. I mean, Sky, Drizzle, these are fun names, and it'll be curious to see where they go from here. But I mean, you're looking at just the level of experience that you had on the Huya Tigers roster put them far and above the level of experience that you could see from some of these other players. And Incredible Miracle, I mean, I guess I was thinking Xenix would maybe be that second team, but I mean, Sonstar played out of his mind. I mean, he played a great second day. I thought, Lilac did well. I thought Wisdom was very good on Kha'Zix especially. And I think Incredible Miracle certainly earned their way in. I think that if you're looking at who is, between Zenix and Prime, I think Zenix is obviously the much more fun team. But, when the pressure was on in that Game 6, they just faltered. And that's what happens when you have a team that doesn't have any real veteran leadership. And, once they got a couple more tournaments under their belt, once they get a little bit more time in the challenger scene in Korea, get a couple, I think things will change for them. But I think we saw exactly what you get when you have 5 really talented but really young and inexperienced players on a roster.
I really wish we'd gotten to see that tiebreaker, though.
It would have been fun as hell. I was really
upset. Yeah, I was like, this is going to suck. I want to see more games.
So I will say, good on Prime. They had nothing to play for except to be a spoiler, and they did it anyway because they have, a lot of self-respect on that team. And they put together, that Game 3 was by far the best that they looked. Zest is a pretty good top laner, turns out.
They played like much stronger than I thought they were going to play. Even though in my head before the start of the game, I was like, Prime is going to win this. I don't know why, but I'm going to be denied this tiebreaker.
Well, you know what did it, right, is that Doa and Monte Cristo made the joke about, it's one of those days where weird things keep happening. It's like, well, now we know tiebreaker can't happen because that would be the normal thing. And Doa and Monte Cristo just claimed it's weird day. So that's what we're going to get.
Yeah.
They jinx us. It's all your fault, Monte Cristo or Doa, whichever one of you said it. Clearly, you just didn't want us to have nice things.
All right. So obviously there's. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about because I kind of wanted to talk about SMEB, specifically because SMEB before coming into this qualifier, the reason why I kind of noticed this guy is just because we kind of played a show match between Machi and IM, even though it was quite bad for us, but. SMEB before this qualifier, SMEB was kind of seen as a really normal, even bad top laner, and then I was told I wasn't sure, but I was told that he was mediocre because he was kind of limited on IM because he had to play kind of the team player rather than because he's kind of apparently he's kind of a carry top laner and he loves playing because. He loves playing Jace, Riven, stuff like this, and he got a solo kill on Impact with Riven, right? But he was mainly playing. He played a lot of tanks, if I remember correctly. I'm still here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just because when Chase talked about Flame replacing SMEB, I kind of had I was kind of running that through my head. I was just kind of, maybe you can say that Flame is a veteran over that, and I feel really sad about Flame leaving CJ. I thought he was the better top laner, but anyways, I just thought that Smith needs more attention. To play some carry top laner, maybe we'll see more of that later on. I'm not sure if he was actually because it's just one of my friend who was really into Korea. Dom, you guys know Dom maybe?
Yeah.
On Twitter. Yeah. He likes that guy quite a lot. Even though we didn't put him quite high for maybe last year, but we both think that he could be the rising star for the next season potentially. Again, that word. But yeah, and then in terms of Flame though, I just really wonder why CJ made that move because if you have to let Flame leave, it must have been something more about they kept space but let Flame leave, so it must have been something about internal issues or something like communication issues or something like that. I don't know. But I just feel sorry for Flame, and I hope that Huya doesn't pick him up because I want to see SMEB, but I hope other teams quickly pick him up. Especially, I don't know about Samsung. Does anyone know about Samsung's lineup? Because
there's been rumors, but I don't think they've announced anything.
Their preseason lineup is QV in top lane, Eve in the jungle, Bliss is the mid. Fury with Jet Engine as the sub, I guess, as the AD carry, and then the support is Wraith with Casper as their listed sub.
Huh.
So that's what they're going into right now. All of them were released on Reddit earlier today.
Okay.
So
with
they have these. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say so. Are any I don't really recognize any of those names actually. Are they all challenger players? What's the deal with
Bliss
that?
has been around. I know Casper's been around.
Yeah, I know Casper, but he's not a starter. He's a sub.
Yeah, I'd have to do a deeper dive, but I believe that a couple of those names are from either IM teams or the old Xenix Storm roster. I'll have to double check a lot of that stuff.
Well, Koreans rename themselves every split too. It seems like people are always giving themselves a new name. So that's interesting, though.
Yeah, no.
So in in this new OGN season, obviously pretty much all of these teams are going to be composed of, a lot of new players, a lot of new faces, at least players we have never seen before. But so how do you think that Huya Tigers and Incredible Miracle are going to perform with the lineups that we see now, and with, all these kind of these chopped up teams that have been put together as all these Korean players have left for China?
Oh, Casper is the support of the team. Do Raven just put that in our Nilo just gave us that. So Casper is the starting support. Apparently that was his Wraith is his new name. This is what I'm talking about.
Okay, so that's
You
how
people settle on
it's in
names.
fantasy. It's the name change. So Jet
guess.
Engine is now known as Fury.
Oh, okay.
Casper is now known as Wraith. So then it's Bliss, Eve, and I'm not even seeing some of these things on
Oh man.
on the eSportspedia page. So I'm just guessing they don't have one. So yeah, Challenger people, it'll be exciting. I mean, as far as, what we can expect for this year from Korea, I feel like we've got, the Korean system is still the Korean system. I think they understand how to get the most out of the talent that they have. I think that getting solo queue talent is easier than molding it, and I feel like they still have the molding process just fine. So we're going to see new stars come together. We're still going to be watching Faker. We're still going to have, enough star power. But it's going to be the rise of a new generation almost. And in that to me is almost more interesting, because
It is.
one of the things that you ran the risk of when you went from two teams per organization to one is that you had, you're going to have to consolidate these rosters. You're going to lose a lot of these guys. Now, I mean, theoretically, we get the best of both worlds, where there's now plenty of room for new Korean talent to come up and go under the Korean system and kind of get cultivated, become this new thing. And in the meantime, some of those guys that wouldn't have found a place in this new one team per organization system can go elsewhere and do their own things. And I don't think one is worse than the other intrinsically. It all comes down to how people handle it. Obviously, the Chinese organizations, for all the reasons we talked about earlier, have issues coming their way. But the Korean organizations, I'm not too worried about. I think that Samsung has proven that they are a great organization because they have a great organization behind the Samsung team. And all that is still there. So I'm more excited than anything else.
This is going to be a true test of the Korean infrastructure, right? Like if Korea comes up and just with a bunch of challenger players produces another team that is because the last 2 years, Korea's produced a team that is head and shoulders above the rest of the world, right? Samsung White this year, and the year before that was SKT. No other team was even close to them. They were just it was really, really scary how good they were. And then if they can do that again this year, with all their star players, so-called best players leaving, like so many of them leaving, I mean, I think everybody else is just going to turn off their computers and go, GG. We just lose.
So, it's very exciting, and of course, everyone wants to. It's almost like the support the troops kind of thing. Like everyone's like, yeah, support the players, yeah, woo. But the problem with that is that if Korea is able to breed talent and to grow talent, as opposed to, which I have no doubt that they can, there's pretty much zero incentive for the organizations, less a third party step in, to pay them more. You know what I'm saying? Everyone was kind of making the comment and the commentary that, unless Faker leaves, Kespa or these organizations or whoever's controlling this isn't going to change. The salaries of these players, which is the number one reason why they left, isn't going to go up. And so if Korea can just create new Matas, create new dandies, then Korea doesn't. Kespa doesn't give a fuck. The organizations don't give a fuck. They just sit back and be like, it's fine, we'll make new people. Go ahead, leave. I don't need to pay you anything.
That's the danger. That's the big downside. And I don't know what that would mean for what League would become. I think we don't ever want it to get to the point. That's why we kind of have the 3/5 rule. We don't ever want it to get to the point where it's like StarCraft 2, where the World Championship are 16 Koreans from 3 different servers, because that's who could be cultivated, and that's it. And I don't think it ever will, because I think the 3/5 rule helps with that. But they just send away all their talent year after year, eventually you get a much more homogenized product, and that's not good for anybody. I hope that the lesson they learn from this is that they need to find a way to compromise. They don't have to. They're never going to be able to pay what Chinese organizations are willing to pay, because the Chinese system is very different from the Korean one. but they're making enough money that they could come a lot closer than they are. And I think
why couldn't Samsung pay a $1 million contract? It's freaking Samsung. They sell the Galaxy.
But they don't have to. They
the
won't
company
ever
that
have
sells
to.
this. Like,
I mean,
I'm pretty sure they can afford to give some. Like, it's great marketing.
It's not the argument that they have to pay. It's that they don't have to pay. It's that if we can keep breeding talent like this, if our system is so good,
but
no one else has
past.
a system.
But they did in the past, right? Like Brood War, all those games, they had to pay that by the end, they had to pay that type of money. They had to pay Flash $1 million. Like, that's just, I don't see why it's lagging so far behind this time. And I think that the minimum, yeah, they did. The minimum salary now is the requirements now are a little bit more in line. Like Monty said, apparently they're in line with the baseball and some of the others, like minor sports leagues or professional sports leagues that are in Korea. So that's a good first step. But I think eventually it's going to happen because it's a global market. It's basic economics, right? Like if you you're not going to want your star player to go away, and if somebody's offering him $1 million from another part of the world and you want to keep him, you're going to offer him $1 million. And I think there might have been a slight bit of arrogance this time with thinking, oh no, that won't happen. The Koreans want, OGN's the best. Nobody will want to leave OGN. Like, we have the best league. We're the most highly touted. Blah 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 blah. Nobody will leave us, and then everybody leaves.
That's exactly what happened. Like, as far as no one leaving, because you use the context of StarCraft, and the thing about StarCraft is that Korea never had never had to compete. Like, if you wanted to compete in StarCraft, you went to Korea because that's where that game thrived.
Yeah, exactly.
It's now a much larger global market, and so this is the first time that Kespa's really like, shit. People are actually competing for a player. It's not that it didn't happen previously in StarCraft, but on a much larger scale now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want
the players paid more. I don't care where they go. Get out of China.
Yeah, get out of China.
Get out of China.
All right, we'll
all
move
reasonable
on
statements
before that turns.
Zero can stay. I like him.
Okay. Yeah. Insect, man, that Fiddlesticks Jungle Worlds. Never forget.
Never forget.
No one will.
So while a lot of people have been watching the NA and EU expansion and a lot of BR games as well, in Taipei we've seen in Taiwan we've seen the IEM Taipei qualifiers going on, and Reasonee's team, Machi Esports, is actually participating in it right now, and they actually won their first round against Domo 2-0. And we keep whenever we talk to you about this, we're always excited. We're like, you rocked it, man. You did good. And you always seem really disappointed. So enlighten us. Like, what happened with your team? It was a swift 2-0 victory. Why aren't you happy with it? What happened in those games?
It was just like, because it's just like how TPA 3-0'd Edge in the GPL summer. It was just, this 2-0 wasn't that. It wasn't as it could have been. It's just that my jungler kind of forgot his microphone, and there was no replacement. So the team communication, because the team communication on my team is so important and my jungler is the main person who provides a lot of information. So the team communication is so dead over there. I don't know. So it could have been much cleaner. I have to say that.
That's so funny.
I'm just imagining if Reasoning was like a local coach, he could have like just standing behind them with a whip and just beating them like.
Yeah, that's all I can imagine.
I so want to whip them.
How many microphones are you sending him with this week, out of curiosity? Like, do you have like 3 backups ready to go just in case?
Make it a really heavy mic, or make it like a really like ugly mic. Like, he has to have the Hello Kitty mic, and he has to wear it to every single event now. And it's like giant.
Except I think that would make him more famous. You know, people would love that. I would love that at least.
GPL is all about show, yo. It's
okay.
So racer jackets.
I have a question. I have a question for you though. What's with all the mid lane? Like, I noticed in both games, 5 of the 6 bans were towards mid lane, and they banned, like, they didn't give your mid anything. Now you guys just seem to steamroll them in lanes. Like, your AD carry is playing 1v2. Your support was roaming all over the place, like in first game, especially making plays, and like they weren't capitalizing. Like, your Corki was 1v2 against like Grave Soda and nothing happened for like 5 minutes. He wasn't even behind in CS. Like, they didn't even deny his farm. Like, what was going on? So in both those regards, one, do you think like your team is going to be able to keep steamrolling like this? Like, are you this much mechanically superior over all the teams that you play? And secondly, what was with all the mid lane bans? Because there's like 5 out of 6 mid lane bans both games. It almost was like your mid lane, you guys were trying to take them off playing anything in mid and see whose champion pool was deeper, or what was the reasoning behind that?
So I have to explain my mid laner first, okay? So my mid laner, for both my mid laner and jungler, they both never played professionally before. And my mid laner he's just a Z main. That's what he was known for, Z only. And he could play Phase when he came, and only a certain maybe a certain extent to Syndra and Orianna. That's why you see bans on those champions. We kind of expand on those. And then you see the LeBlanc pick on that day. LeBlanc is a really good counter to Jace, just so you know. And I think LeBlanc is going to be really strong in 4.20 and so on because of a couple of wave clear nerves and such. LeBlanc is really going to be strong. But so LeBlanc was a surprise to everybody. LeBlanc was a surprise to everybody because I kind of trained him to do that. In terms of mechanics and such, though, Domo is the amateur team. That's part of the reason I'm not happy. If we had to fight this hard against an amateur team, because to be honest, I don't think my team is mechanically gifted at all. Only maybe my bottom lane, maybe. And the whole thing is really built upon team communication. I really think that team communication can make up a lot of mechanical weaknesses, everything. Because if you compare them to other teams, Yoi, Flash Wolves have really, their support is really awesome. You got Wayne's on TPA, you got Maple, you got Toys, you got so many mids. And then top laner, I'm confident in my top laner. And the jungler, my jungler is probably one of the weakest in the professional scene in Taiwan. So no, I don't think we're that mechanically better than others, but I do believe in our communication. If that answers your question.
So I guess what are you saying as you're preparing for some of these? Like obviously you're going up against the UA Flash Wolves next round. If things go the way that you're kind of indicating that they will, your next match would be against probably TPA. So where is it that, how is it that you're trying to get this team ready for some of these bigger names in the Taiwan scene? And what is it that you're seeing that you think you can take advantage of when you see, like a team like TPA's got some blood in the water right now?
Well, first of all, we always have to go back to pick and ban phase, because I do think that their pick and ban phase is kind of predictable. But in later on, within the game, the communication, I can't specifically say that we're better at what picks or something, but we do try to find that, this team, say Yoi Flash Wolves, I can just say this since I don't think they are watching this anyways. You can find some traits and even in the strong teams, you can find some traits that they are strong and not so strong at, and you try to make them into that uncomfortable zone. Say Yoi Flash Wolves is stronger at kite, but they are not that strong when you put all the team fights together and such. So you try to find these little things that they are not comfortable with and try to poke those points, if that makes sense. And I do believe my team can win. If they just bring their microphone, they got some chance, okay? if that microphone is there, okay? I wouldn't say that because that skill disparity is still there, but communication can make it up. Plus the preparation into what their weaknesses is, including ours, but yeah, a lot of stuff.
So you've noted before that the Flash Wolves are pretty strong, and like we said, which means that most likely your next round is going to be after, the third round, I suppose, is going to be against TPA. But even TPA has been faltering a little bit recently, and it seems like they've been underperforming. And you commented on a predictable pick ban phase, but is there more to it than that? Like, what are TPA's weaknesses, and why did they fail against the Flash Wolves in this first round?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that Flash Wolves is, if they could have had Maple last year in season 4, it wasn't going to be TPA. It was going to be UE Flash Wolves. That's just my opinion. I do think that because last year Maple was only 16, I think. This year he finally is 17. He can compete in GPO. He can compete. Well, it's called LMS now. So he's been the core of that team, and he's been the strongest mid in Taiwan, like since season 3 already. Right? You see the Gamma Bear. UE Flash was basically Gamma Bear without wings, and so this year they have the least roster shift, and they are really strong as one. So I do think that because of their season 4 performance, people are kind of underrating them. They are really strong. But for TPA, I do think that they actually played better than thought. Like season 4 performance, we would think that okay, TPA is probably going to be still as dominant. No, that's not the case, because they lost BB. Like BB retired. Okay, BB retired. That was their core of that team, and then they tried to put Achi to the bottom lane. AD carry with Jay, that didn't work out. They were losing all the dual queues. They moved Morning from mid to top. I think that was a smart choice because Morning is really strong mechanically, and I do have to say, as much as you love Chowie, many people love him. In Taiwan, we do think that Morning is a better mid.
Mm-hmm.
Morning is a better mid because it's a different level for us. At least that's from our perspective. But moving him from mid to top, that will be no problem. He is mechanically strong. That kid does have some nerves issue in international stage though. But Chowie to the mid lane, that solves a lot of issues. I do think that Lupin, okay, so for people that didn't know, TPA got a Korean AD carry, Lupin. He was a substitute from Najin Black Sword. And this guy he's actually am interested in what he's gonna bring. Because after BB retired, I believe that my AD carry, like D from my own team, I thought that he was going to be the best AD carry in the whole region. Not after this Lupin guy joined. This Lupin guy has good mechanics.
Muted yourself, Reasoning.
Yeah, you just hit mute. Reasoning, you muted yourself.
Communication issues though.
Oh, there we go.
Because team communications, but it's not gonna be that, because if you think about it, he only just joined like less than a month, and he's already has top tier, like in this region he's already at the top without actually practicing much with the player, with the team. And I do think that this is something I didn't mention before when we talked about communication with the Korean players in China. I do think that there is a certain ways that you can communicate. Because I don't know if you actually watch Korean solo queue in high elo solo queue. What they do is they use a lot of not just smart pings, but a lot of different ping patterns to actually communicate. If you ping once at the blue buff, that means they are eating blue buff. Ping twice, go. Ping 3 times, go, go, go. Stuff like that. So I do think that Starhorn Royal Club had that practice pings before, and I do think that they kind of have to implement that with Lupin, and TPA will be a really strong team as well. But I still have my faith in UE Flash Wolves, and I'm gonna be on the hype train on that. I'm gonna tell you that. Flash Wolves.
I too was impressed by the Flash Wolves. So, how do you see Machi placing? Like, if you win this next matchup, do you guys think you can make it to IEM? Do you guys expect to qualify?
That's our goal. Like, it's gonna, from an outsider perspective, our team is not gonna be that strong. But when I'm looking at from outsider point of view, I don't think have that much, like, with our chance is not that high, but when I prepare my stuff, I do think that all teams have weakness, except I have to train their execution. That's one thing. So no, from an outsider point of view, not so much of a chance, but that's my goal. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we can all hope. I hope personally. It'd be really cool to see you guys in IEM. But moving on.
Awesome.
It would be good. It'd be great. I like your team. I like the lineup. I don't understand the LeBlanc pick still, but I'm not mechanically good enough to comment on lane matchups at all. It's just odd to me to see it, but it worked, and obviously it worked really well. So I suppose
I've heard a few pros say it's like coming back, like that they think it's quite strong because of the wave clear changes. So.
Alrighty. Well, I will take it from your pros and from Reasony saying the exact same thing just a few minutes ago. Moving on to probably, I don't know. I feel like it's been pretty interesting week in the EU expansion. So to start off, I want to go over a couple of these matches really quickly because they were very one-sided and not exciting to watch. So let's talk about Different Dimension versus Reason Gaming really quickly. Like one-word summary of those games.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Stop.
I mean, Reason Gaming knows how to work together as a team and operate as a unit. And Different Dimension has one really good AD carry who's named Dominant, and it fits. But you can't be a one-note team and get into the top 4 of the EU Challenger scene.
And if you are, don't name your team after him. I mean, come on, that just gives it away. It's not being stealthy with your strategy at all now, is it? You're just literally naming your team after what you're going to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I really was not impressed by pick ban from Different Dimension. It was just really poor. I mean, the first game, they didn't look like they had a comp at all, like some awkward pick comp, this Rammus jungle, this top Maokai. And game 2, it was like wasn't much better, like this weird Wombo comp with J4 and Orianna, but they never really executed. They were outplayed consistently. They kept splitting up. I mean, this is a thing that we see a lot in the Challenger Leagues and the Challenger Promotion Series is that there are just some teams that are significantly better and are playing on another level, and I think this was one of those cases.
Well, I think it comes down to how much experience you have playing in a 5v5 Challenger high-pressure setting, right? Like a lot of these guys, even if you take a look at a lot of their 5 experiences playing on the Challenger ladder, half of that is like Diamond 1 teams and stuff that you're playing. You know what I mean? Like you're not getting good practice that way, so it's like when you have a team that's been around for like an organization that's been around quite a bit, like Reason Gaming has been around for a little while in the Challenger scene now, and they've got some players that have come in and out through the system who have played a lot more professional experience. That's going to have a huge edge, and that's all that was. That's what some of these series were, to be honest. It was just one team was clearly better.
No,
That's not really much to say.
No respectable team is going to use ranked 5s as a measurement for any sort of scrim block. When teams are setting up scrim blocks, typically it's scrim partners, because obviously you have to think at that high of the Challenger ladder, your queue times are going to be like 40 minutes. So if you set aside like a 4-hour scrim block, you're maybe going to get 2 games, maybe a game and a half, and that just by waiting for queue times, and like you said, also like matching up against like the teams. And I think a big part of it also is infrastructure. So if you're getting good scrims and you're scrimming all the time and making the most out of your scrim block, not through just like analysis with working with the coaches, but also having a manager there to get you these scrims, to communicate to the players, don't have to do it themselves. So a big part of the Challenger scene and why we don't have the resources behind these teams to like smooth and streamline their efficiency in practice.
Yeah, it's definitely true.
Yeah, I mean, Reason Gaming definitely benefited from having at least some of that structure there versus Different Dimension, which has kind of been doing its thing in a much smaller Greek scene, and might not have that. I will say one thing, though. I am still terrified every time Selivar goes in for a 2v2. Every time he feels like he has a fight that he can take, I'm on edge. I just feel like it's going to go horribly wrong, and most of the time, it kind of has. I know he was doing he was playing on another team in the Black Monster Cup, just a ranked 5s group. I forget what they were called, but every time he went, and he just had a terrible game. And just, I don't know. I think his positioning is a bit off, and I think that's something that a better team is going to exploit. But I think Different Dimension, obviously, winning that bot lane wasn't what they needed to succeed. They needed to win the team fights and get objectives and whatever else, and they didn't have the ability to do that.
Nope.
Take Fun did. Take Fun's really good, for the record, in case anyone was wondering. He's really good.
Agreed. So moving on to yet another one-sided match, albeit this one was a little more convoluted due to some technical difficulties. Melon Cats versus H2K. So the first thing I noticed in this match is that at about 10 minutes, we had a 30 CS differential in the top lane. And by 13 minutes, we have a 40 CS differential in the top lane and a 30 CS differential in the mid lane. And then by like 17 minutes, we have an 8K, 9K gold lead. So if you thought the different dimension games were one-sided, this takes it to a whole nother level.
H2K clearly looks like the best team from what I've seen. They're clearly the best team in this tournament.
I don't know. Probably now. I mean, after everything's kind of gone down. I'll say this. It's hard to... I mean, Odoamne is amazing. I think he should be in the LCS no matter what happens with this team, because I think he's quite possibly a top 5 top laner in that region.
John spoke highly of him.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, like, you look at, who was he laning up against? Oh, he was laning against Zeclipse, who is the name of the Melon Cats coach, not a player on their roster. Obviously, Flexus, I think it is, got banned. So he wasn't able to go. Flaxish is what it is. So he wasn't able to be there. So it was a support main who isn't even at the level of the rest of his team, is just a coach, playing out of position in the top lane. Yeah, 40 CS difference against one of the top. Well, I'm sorry?
I said, I think Reasony knows something about this situation.
Oh, yeah, please, Reasony, go on ahead.
No, I'm fucking to the story.
No, I was making the joke, Reasony, because team in GPL had to play their manager as well. And it was the oldest person to play competitively. I believe he was like 44 years old because the player got banned.
Wasn't it the owner
the
one
owner,
week, and then the next week it was the manager?
So it went from like a silver player to like a diamond 2 player. And what was the name of that team, Reasony?
Upgrade. That's what you call upgrade, right? From silver to diamond 2.
Yeah.
Wow. No, continue.
Immediate.
I didn't know that story. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that's so wonderful.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
The punchline is it happens to his team.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to bring up harsh memories for you, but as far as H2K goes, I do feel like they are. This is the old Cloud9 Eclipse team that's been around for a while. We know Fabivin is really good. He's had some problems on LAN events when he goes offline. He's had some nerve issues. I think he's done it enough times that I don't believe that those will be there this time around. I think he's in a much better headspace, and I think that this is an organization that, again, has put some money behind this team. My big concern with them is Lulex, who... Obviously, his only previous experience was a couple weeks on that Ninjas in Pajamas roster after they kicked Coup, but before they had disbanded as a team. Yeah. And he wasn't very good. And in this particular game, it didn't matter because Melon Cats were so far behind in the top and bottom lane, as you mentioned. But we're looking at the 420 patch coming up, and I am really concerned on how much jungle pathing and making smart decisions from that position is going to influence the overall makeup of this tournament. And if you believe that those jungle changes are significant enough that the difference between a good jungler and a great jungler is going to be even larger than it usually is for these teams, that's something you can point to as an exploitable weakness for them going forward. I don't think it's enough to sink them given the competition around them, because I think every other lane they have is really, really good. Hjarnan, if it's possible for him to be underrated at this point, I think he still is a little bit. But I do wonder if Lulex is going to make it as easy as it might look on paper.
Well, there's that thing that you brought up about Odoamne and his tendency to choke a little bit, and this whole roster.
Fabivin is the one. Odoamne is the top laner who's just always amazing. Fabivin is the one who's had.
Didn't he also not do so well the last time they got really close though? I thought he played it pretty poorly in the last years. Or last splits challenger at the very end, or am I? Anyway, even if it's just forbidden, if a player chokes, you have to be worried about that, right? Because that could signify mental block, and for some people that never goes away. They always have a hard time performing right in that one really important moment. So it'll be interesting, but I think they are the best team by far, at least from what I've seen in this tournament. They play the best together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of junglers, talented junglers, and obviously skill disparity there, let's talk a little bit about my favorite jungler in this tournament, Horo. Anyone?
Ah,
Let's not.
So,
Let's not
will
talk
say
about it. And
that
pretend we
I-
did.
I feel so silly because it's the most wrong. You know, I have my Less Than Legends podcast that I do. And not seeing this Millennium thing coming is probably the silliest mistake that I've made in my esports career. I mean, this is an organization that I was railing on in my, my later Paravine articles towards the end of the year for not getting a coach until I don't think they even had a coach in the LCS playoffs. I don't know who their coach is now, but as far as I know, it's still the same guy who doesn't really play League of Legends very much. They were importing 2 Koreans, which we saw what happened when Coast did that, a month before, and it didn't work. We were switching Ryu back from the jungle to the mid lane, which doesn't have a high success rate. I can't say I'm surprised by this particular outcome now that I see it. I guess I think a lot of my trepidation came in from thinking that Giant should have looked a lot more dominant against a much weaker Ascension team the week before. But it turns out that XPepe is really good, and that Frederick is still really good. And that bot lane has enough synergy, especially now that Rydell's kind of cleansed off any Gamers 2 stink that he still had on him. And now that team just played much more like a team than Millennium did. And it goes all the way full circle.
Collapsed, right?
Yeah.
Millennium collapsed because they were winning. They won the first game and then they were up 3K. And then it's like, we don't know how to close the game. Oh no, we lose the game. Oh no, we lose the series. Oh no. Like that's just what happened. Like it just was like, it started out looking good and then just went slowly, and just fell off the face of the earth.
That this is what happened, like, because obviously unless you're in comms, you can't tell what happens. But in my experience of working with other teams, like that dive. So think about in the second game when they dove out, or maybe it was the third game. I think it was the third game. They picked Rumble into Aurelia, and then they dove on the Alistar bottom, and that's kind of like when it was the unraveling for Millennium. Like that was going to be the last game. I think it was the second game for Giants. Like think about in that situation, you're a team, it's your final game, you have to show up right here, you make this really big important dive kind of in the early to mid game, and everything falls apart, and it all just goes all wrong. 9 times out of 10, like in a team, especially a very new team that doesn't have a lot of like history with each other, communication just stops. People just stop talking to each other. Now added language barrier in that. Like
that's true.
Like
that's actually really true.
My assumption there is after that happened, it just went dead. Of course, I can't say that for sure because I wasn't in comms, but just from like experience and thinking about how that situation would happen, and this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like when you trade out a player, even though you make an immediate upgrade as far as mechanics, and sometimes that's enough to just like brute force. But if you're at like a certain level, like mechanics, it all gets more comparable the higher you go up. Not saying that Rue isn't a fantastic player or anything like that, but
yeah.
I mean.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
I
do kind of feel like, like I mean, that story kind of clicks with everything I've heard from the Millennium organization for a while now. It does make me wonder if this team would have been better off just sticking to their guns and going with the 5 guys that they had in the LCS. I mean, Kerp was not a bad mid laner, and
no,
I mean, say what you will about Khan Next, but he was a known quantity. And in the challenger scene especially, known quantities are huge. I didn't say he was good. I didn't say he was even, but he was something you could game plan around because you knew what it was. And that's kind of the point that Fruskeren has made, is that even if you have an upgrade, I mean, I don't think anyone is saying that if you put Horo and Connex in a room, that Horo wouldn't be the better jungler. But that was irrelevant to the overall impact that those 2 guys had on the team. And people knew what Connex's pathing was going to look like, how he was going to try to help certain lanes or whatever else. Clearly, the communication wasn't there with Horo in that second and third game. And it's one thing that it's very easy to play while ahead in all your lanes. It's a lot harder when things start going wrong. That's when the communication really matters.
Well, they couldn't close out.
Wasn't there.
Game 2. Yeah. It was like it was like Millennium didn't actually improve. It was like, okay, we got these mechanical upgrades, but Millennium was never a terrible team mechanically. They were, a lot of the times they were in the games early. They just literally had no idea how to play the meta game, And it's like, I think maybe Millennium's hope was, we'll bring in Koreans. Koreans just, it's the meta game's implanted in their DNA. We can just bring them over here and our team will be magical and everything will be fairy dust. And that's just not how it happened.
I mean, I think it all comes back to the organization. It's an organization that I criticized pretty heavily towards the end of that split. I think that they still haven't invested in the way that you would want a team with that kind of, experience in the LCS and in other competitive esports to invest. And I
they're a
think
big
it
organization.
shows. Yeah, there's no excuse for them not being willing to spend the money on the infrastructure. And everything I've heard says that infrastructure is not there. And at some point, there's no amount of talent you can bring in to fix that. And I think that's what we learned. And good on Giants for capitalizing on it. I mean, focusing on everything that Millennium did wrong takes away from what was a really great game from Giants Game 2 to come back from that deficit and to close things out in Game 3. I think they do interesting things with their compositions. And I'm really curious to see what they do on patch 420 because especially Xpepe and Frederico, I mean, they do weird things with their picks. And when there's no real established meta that we know of, there's going to have been very few games played on a tournament realm on patch 420 before this. I think it'll be really interesting to see what they do and where they go from here.
Yeah. Moving on to our next upset, N Faculty versus Gamers 2. Gamers 2 may be another poor organization. Hashtag loss a lot for those of you who would like to participate in my favorite upset of the tournament.
Is anyone upset about this? Even Ocelot's fans have got to be finding it a little funny at this point, right?
If all people were more like him, it would be a better world.
That is true. He
That guy
has taught us that.
I mean, I will be completely honest. I have gone from an Ocelot fan to I don't like this guy at all in the past, about a year. I'd say in about a year, I've gone from somebody who liked him to somebody who actively dislikes him. Not oh, whatever, neutral. But between the LS thing, some of the arrogance that he displays, it's kind of this is just fitting, man. This is just kind of what you get. This is karmic retribution for not being a cool guy and being pretty arrogant most of the time. I don't know. It's some of the things he says were none of the challenger teams are good. Most of the LCS teams suck except 2. And then you can't even get into the LCS. It's buddy, I don't know if you noticed this, but you played terrible. Why did you play it?
Sorry, he made these comments about the Black Monster Cup about how we're not really trying for that one because we want to focus on the patch for the LCS. And then they don't even get to patch 420. I mean, I don't want to say it's all on Ocelot because I feel like that's a very kind of easy way to dismiss. I mean, I think that Yuki60 for everything that he was able to do in the first round, and he had a great series in the first round with Kazing, who I really thought was going to be kind of a great pickup for them because I think Kazing was very underrated on Super Hot Crew. But Yuki just didn't show up. I mean, that bot lane was completely ineffective all 3 series. Ku has yet to live up to his potential. I mean, we've seen the problems that Ninjas in Pajamas had with him. I don't know how much of it is him not clicking with Ocelot or him just having the same kind of stubbornness and refusal to fix some of the issues we've seen in his game. You can predict his pathing very easily. You know exactly what he's going to be trying to do from the second he locks in his champion. Guess what? Teams that are good teams with organizations behind them like N Faculty, who, even though a lot of people haven't heard about them, this is a team that's played together for years, since 2012 years. Other than Xaxis and Sauce Perfect, who are the 2 new guys from this roster, this roster's been playing together just for a very long time with the same guys in charge, the same heads of the organization. And I think it shows. I think Obvious is a pretty good jungler. The Cedrian Mountain bottom lane did what it needed to do. Sauce Perfect is definitely the biggest pickup for them, and I can kind of take or leave Xaxis, to be honest, but that's a real team, and you need to take real teams seriously. And I don't know if Gamers 2 was just looking ahead or if Ocelot just wasn't able to match up to what Sauce Perfect was able to do on his Orianna, but it just collapsed under it.
Yeah, basically.
It does pose a question about how did they prepare on this match, because Broken Shard and Soja left the team, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. That's the thing that makes me really try and figure out what is going on with Ocelot's organization. Because first there's the LS coach drama, then a month before the most important tournament you play, you dismiss your coach and your analyst.
Narcissism.
What?
Pure
What?
narcissism.
What? Like, what are you doing? And apparently, I mean, according to the Daily Dot article, like, I don't know. I mean, it was like, I don't know how much credibility to give this, but the Daily Dot printed that Ocelot asked him to leave. So it wasn't that like Broken Shark said, "Do you know what? I'm just going to be a dick and leave like 1 month before this tournament." No, apparently he was asked to leave. So what is going on there? Like, what?
Well, clearly the advice that Broken Shard was giving wasn't worth money, so he just decided not to employ him anymore, because that's what he does with coaches that he decides arbitrarily aren't giving him the value that he seems to think they should be giving. I genuinely don't know how that guy's mind works. Clearly he's got some sort of system, and he's been able to milk what he has to the cost of a mansion that's far nicer than any house I will likely ever live in. So, I mean, good on him for that. Like, he's
you can't hate on his success,
but I mean, he just seems to have this idea that he's got it all figured out, and he didn't. And now they have to go back to the drawing board again. And I can't wait to see how Koo and the rest of those guys are gonna deal with it, because I think there's enough talent on that roster. He might not have many of these friends of his around on this, and hanging out in his mansion much longer if the LCS picks up some of that talent that is available. JWoww is there. Kazing should get picked up somewhere. And I don't know what Gamers 2 becomes if he doesn't figure it out, and soon, that he might be his biggest problem.
JWoww and Koo were super hyped too, so I don't know. It's awful. It's awful. I'm just waiting for his Facebook post.
Well, I'm sure we could talk about Ocelot and his very large quantity of money that he always seems to fail with.
I like his scarves.
Yeah, he's got good taste in scarves.
True.
Not so much anything else, but good taste in scarves.
Send me a scarf, Carlos. Let's be friends.
The thing I want to end on tonight, we had a couple listener questions, and I'm sorry to everybody who wrote in that we probably won't get to all of them, but we probably only have time for one at this point. But JDog21 asked, which team is going to benefit the most from coaches on stage for pick ban, and how are they going to prevent the cycle of coaches that they say are good but really don't know anything?
In what context? Like, what teams is he talking about? We're talking about NA teams, EU teams, Chinese teams, Korean teams.
Let's talk about NA a little bit, because we've talked about pretty much every other region tonight. So let's look at NA teams and what do we expect? What teams do we expect to gain the most from this in NA?
I think CLG gains a lot. I mean, this is a team that has several players that...
Any team that has communication issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think Skara brings a lot to the table. So I think he automatically having someone in there who can be a voice of reason when some of those other things break down is really valuable. What other teams are going to have communication issues? I think it's something we're going to see as the season progresses, how much value these coaches have. It's really hard to predict, because we don't have any measurable stat or skill or anything we can
pay attention to who the coaches are. There
Yeah,
are very
that's
few
true.
coaches that anyone even knows really exist or can even name the coaches or the structure behind anything. And again, it comes full circle back to the fact that subconsciously how the game, how League of Legends has been presented to us as like an intake hasn't involved analysts or coaches or giving them any sort. Like, the last year was the first year that pretty much every single LCS team finally got a coach and an analyst, and it's no surprise that NA suddenly does better at Worlds than they have in previous years. Oh, who would imagine that? If we got coaches and analysts, suddenly we perform better. But
Yeah.
and
the structure. But I definitely think actually TSM will, surprisingly enough. As much as I've shit on Loco on this show, I think that TSM's issue was that they can't react to things, right? Like, if the plan was set and the pick ban phase worked as planned, then everything made sense. They picked everything, they got what they wanted. Maybe Loco will be able to help them, because at least the way they talk, they seem to do a ton of research, create a bunch of different scenarios. Maybe Loco will help them in case one of the scenarios that pops up isn't one that they planned for. Maybe he'll be better on the fly at thinking than they are. Because that was an issue we saw at Worlds, right? Like, if they didn't get what they wanted, they played very differently from when they got the champions they wanted, and they played incredibly well. So that could be, I think TSM could really benefit from it.
Well, Loco's also
more so than any of the others.
Kind of a I don't want to call him a veteran player, but he has professional experience.
Yeah,
and
for
he
sure.
seems like a very outspoken person. You know, he's he stated multiple times, you know, he helped a player, or, you know, like the running joke, like, oh, you know, I taught this guy everything. So, and right now the shot caller for TSM is Bjergsen, yes? And Bjergsen is a very new player, very good player, but he doesn't have a lot of, like, experience. And one of the big things that's kind of been talked about with TSM is, you know, is Bjergsen able to focus on winning his lane and making the calls that TSM needs. And if you look at their lineup, I mean, like, the legacy player obviously is Dyrus, and Dyrus's personality, especially coming from the top lane, doesn't seem like really, like, assertive, like, listen to me. Like, if you put it, like, Dyrus next to Reginald, like, obviously you'd be like, oh, Reginald's going to be, like, the leader there. So the fact that you would put a player who has, you know, professional experience on stage behind them, that has, like, the personality, the reputation that Loco Doco has, like, obviously that would be a strong, like, a lightning rod for trying to center them. Who is, like, running their washing machine?
Reasoning.
Well,
Tap your mic real quick.
I can.
Oh, there you go.
Just your Skype's set to auto adjust, so when you stop talking completely, it keeps boosting the levels of your mic until it can
My
hear
ears
something.
just got microwaved.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I didn't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say is that I think Cloud9 is pretty much the only team that doesn't. I think every team benefits to different degrees, of course, but Cloud9 probably benefits the least from this. I think I've always been impressed by their pick ban phase. Like, they've always had a level head. You know, Lemon's known for being pretty on top of the metagame. He's got that notebook. He's got a plan for pick and ban phase. And I don't think they gain much of anything from this. And it makes me not as excited for Cloud9, because I'm curious how bringing a coach into their pick ban phase is going to affect them, if at all.
I don't think that will help them that much. I think this goes back to what Reasoning was saying earlier about how this is going to, like, shrink the gap between the top teams and the lower teams, because the lower teams will be able to improve more from the coach than the teams at the top that don't. You know what I mean? Like, the teams at the top are probably they've hammered out a lot of these issues already.
Yeah, they understand
but you also
already. They have the experience. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you also have to trust Cloud9, you know, owners like Jack. I mean, he's been doing this for a while. He's been doing this in multiple esports.
Oh, sure.
I feel like he's going to get a coach that can add value. I kind of trust the decisions there. And I also just wanted to touch on the other half of the question, which was, you know, how quickly do we think bad coaches are going to be weeded out? I think very quickly. I think this is the time where now no one can make the excuse of, oh, they didn't listen to me, or, oh, they ended up just doing this thing in a panic, or, oh, you know, I had all these other ideas. No, now they're there. Now they're going to be putting in their input directly. So if they come up with a strategy and it goes wrong, everyone knows what happened. And now we add accountability to coaches, you know, and it kind of brings up that with great power comes great responsibility idea. Now they have a great power on how they can influence these matches. But if they don't bring in the right coaches, if they, you know, just bring in a guy to have a guy because they think that's going to naturally make the team better, teams are going to find out really quickly that that is not the advantage they think it is.
Yeah.
One thing
there's no way all coach hire goes well. This does not happen. Sorry, please continue reasoning.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, it was just, I kind of just pop on in my head that talking about Cloud9, because like I said before, like, even though I thought the gap is going to be shrinking, just like I thought the gap is going to be shrinking in terms of pick and ban phase, yes, but I thought about how it's gonna different from a good team to a great team in terms of pick and ban phase, because coaches, I do think right now that Cloud9 may benefit a lot more actually, because it's not just about the picks, but also about the information that you get from, let's say, power spikes, the team comp goals, and the enemy weakness, enemy strength, and a lot of those stuff that players might forget when they are in pick and ban phase. So if maybe Charlie or I assume it's going to be Charlie in the pick and ban phase with them. So Charlie, from what I know, he has a lot of information about teams, and so if they go in with that information and they talk about team comp, the composition goal, and power spikes, team strength, weaknesses, if they remind the players about this, they might be even more crisp. Like, they look crisp already, right? But they may look even better than before if this is how it's gonna happen. If you know what I mean, like, there's much more information that's gonna go through in pick and ban.
Of course, they just have a little bit less room to improve than a team that's terrible at picks and bans. And by having a coach in there, they can get up to maybe like close to where Cloud9 is before, where maybe Cloud9 can only go from like 95 to like 97%. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll definitely help them too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, excellent. Well, everybody, that's going to do it for us tonight here on Into the Rift. This has been episode 12. Sorry, kind of a sudden transition out. But thank you so much to Reasoning and Frostgurn for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you both on. Excellent to talk about SEA and that China one team rule, which I know a lot of people have been confused about. If you guys want to know any more about China, be sure to check out China Talk. And then if you want to know any more about Reasoning here, Kelsey Moser just did an interview with him on our new series AFK, so be sure to check that out as well. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, especially to Dave and Chase, as always, for being here. Enjoy the rest of the night.